Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the Assembly Committee on Judiciary to order. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Belbrae Axelrod.
Here.
Assemblywoman Cohen.
Here.
Assemblywoman Gonzalez.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hanson. Assemblywoman Hardy.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Krasner.
Here.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Wynn. Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblyman Ortlicker.
Here.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Here.
Chairman Yeager.
Here. We do have a quorum. I see Assemblywoman Cohen is with us. Assemblywoman Hanson appears to be on the Zoom, but maybe not in front of her computer, so I will note when she arrives. And Vice Chair Wynn is running just a few minutes late, so for now, please mark her absent excuse, and I'll also note when she arrives. As I noted, we do have a quorum. I want to wish good morning to the members who are joining us this morning and to members of the public who may be watching either on the legislature's website or on our YouTube channel. Welcome to day 36 of the 81st session of the Nevada Legislature, and happy International Women's Day to everyone as well. I was just looking at our committee, and I note that 2/3 of our members of the Assembly Judiciary Committee are women, so happy International Women's Day to the members and to our staff, the majority of which are also women, so women really do make this committee happen on a day-to-day basis. Before we move to our agenda, just a few housekeeping rules. For those of you on the Zoom, please make sure to mute when you're not speaking. That'll help with the audio feedback. Please remember to state your name if you are presenting today each time that you speak or you're asked a question. That'll help with our committee secretary preparing the minutes. We do expect courtesy and respect in our interactions with one another. We don't always agree on policy. That's perfectly fine, but we need to make sure we're being respectful of one another and of the legislative institution. And then finally, many members are using multiple devices and screens to participate in this morning's meeting, so please don't see it as a sign of disrespect if members appear to be looking at other devices during the meeting. With those behind us, we're going to move to our agenda. Members, as you can see, we have one bill on the agenda today, so I will go ahead and open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 64. Assembly Bill 64 revises provisions relating to certain crimes. For members of the committee, you should have received by email this morning a proposed amendment proffered by the Attorney General's office, who's the sponsor of the bill. For members of the public, you can also find that amendment on Nellis, the proposed amendment on Nellis. So I want to welcome back to the committee, Ms. Adair from the Attorney General's office. I think it's been a little while since you've joined us. I remember the presentation early on in the session, but want to welcome you back to the Assembly Judiciary Committee this morning. We'll give you a chance to present the bill as amended, and then I'm sure we'll have some questions for you. So when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Yeager. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jessica Adair, and I serve as the Chief of Staff in the Nevada Attorney General's office. AB 64 is a bill intended to enhance the Attorney General's office ongoing enforcement efforts against sex trafficking in Nevada. I know this is quite a heavy topic for this early in the morning, so thank you for bearing with me. Sex traffickers frequently prey on the most vulnerable among us, including children and those who have a history of trauma or being abused. Trafficking organizations can be sophisticated organized crime operations or a single individual. Regardless of the structure, all traffickers use force or fraud to profit off of the commercial sexual exploitation of another adult or a child. Combating sex trafficking is a top priority for Attorney General Ford. Our office coordinates with other federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies in Nevada to investigate and prosecute sex trafficking cases. AG criminal investigators are embedded in task forces in both northern and southern Nevada that focus on trafficking and internet crimes against children investigations. Our prosecution efforts are led by Senior Deputy Attorney General Alyssa Engler, who also serves as the Nevada Advocate for Missing and Exploited Children. Beyond investigations and prosecution, our office coordinates with stakeholders across the state to improve the state's enforcement efforts and services provided to survivors. For example, our office hosted a law enforcement summit in both northern and southern Nevada that focused on sex trafficking and brought leading experts from across the country to present on cutting-edge investigation techniques. We also serve on multiple trafficking task forces and the Nevada Coalition to prevent the commercial sexual exploitation of children. AB 64 directly relates to the efforts of the Attorney General's office ability to work with our law enforcement partners across the state to jointly combat this insidious criminal activity. I would like to bring this committee's attention to an amendment provided by this office. This amendment reflects changes requested by criminal justice stakeholders and other interested parties. Turning to the amendment, sections 1 and 2 revert to the original statutory provisions regarding NRS 199.230 and NRS 199.305, respectively. Section 3 expands the Office of the Attorney General's jurisdiction to prosecute these crimes. Currently, our office has concurrent jurisdiction with district attorneys to prosecute pandering and sex trafficking, which is NRS 200.300, living from the earnings of a prostitute, NRS 201.320, and advancing prostitution, which is NRS 201.395. This amendment proposes to add related crimes that have similar elements, NRS 201.301, which criminalizes facilitating sex trafficking, and NRS 201.354, which criminalizes engaging prostitution or solicitation for prostitution. Section 3, subsection 2 also gives the Attorney General's office jurisdiction over ancillary crimes committed in the course of one of the previously listed crimes. For example, if a trafficker also committed kidnapping while facilitating sex trafficking, our office would also be able to charge kidnapping, which is not normally in our jurisdiction. Section 4 makes a clarification to NRS 201.354. In the 2019 legislative session, the Attorney General's office sponsored and this legislature passed an amendment to this statute that permitted sting operations for those soliciting children. This bill clarifies that a person who solicits a child, a peace officer posing as a child, or a person acting on behalf of a peace officer by posing as a child is guilty of soliciting a child. In practice, law enforcement agencies use online advertising mechanisms to post fake advertisements for commercially sexually exploited children. Solicitors often request photos of a person or child being solicited. Because of that reason, peace officers work with individuals to provide these photos for the operation. Our office, in coordination with local law enforcement agencies and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, have conducted several successful operations that resulted in the arrest of dozens of adults who were soliciting children for commercial sexual exploitation. This method of investigation specifically targets those who are seeking to harm Nevada's children. It also represents an important philosophical shift for law enforcement to focus on those who solicit and the traffickers themselves, and away from focusing on the victims of sex trafficking. And finally, Section 5 of the amendment removes previously proposed changes and reverts to the original statutory provisions regarding NRS 201.430. Thank you for hearing our bill presentation, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much for the presentation, Ms. Adair. I know we're going to have a number of questions, but I happened to run into Assemblyman O'Neill in the hallway this morning, and he told me he had a couple of questions, so we'll start with him.
Thank you, Chair. Great way to start a Monday morning. Thank you, Ms. Adair and the Attorney General for bringing this bill forward. I've got to tell you, I did 40 years in law enforcement with probably 30 of them in investigations. And I want to talk to you specifically about Section 1. If I may, and a couple questions I have. You talk about a person by persuasion, force, threat, intimidation, deception, or otherwise is with the intent to obstruct. Then you go on to describe is guilty of a class category D felony if physical force or the immediate threat of physical force is used. It's a gross misdemeanor if there's no physical force or immediate threat. Let me give you an inference and help me see where this would fit in. I'm talking to a witness. I've got a baseball bat in my hand, and I'm saying to you, how's your day going right now? You got anything planned for later on today or tomorrow? There's no threat, there's no immediate, or I don't have anything. I'm just standing there as you're maybe as a pimp or somebody else with a strong tone. The threat isn't immediate, but to me, all threats, whether immediate or implied, period, should be classified in a felony. The other part of that question is, you talk about only having it during such proceedings as court, subpoena. How about during investigations? So it says in other action investigations or other, so investigations would be protected. We haven't gone to court yet. I'm just handling the case from the start. So any of that, any prevention of a witness talking to me, you could prosecute, correct? If I understand this correctly, and to me, they all should be felonies.
Thank you, Assemblyman, for the question. Jessica Adair for the record. So in our proposed amendment, we're actually taking out any changes to the current NRS regarding victim witness dissuasion. So the reason for that is we had been working with some stakeholders on this particular issue. We recognize that there is a unique relationship often between traffickers and victims. However, that leads to, I think, a more susceptibility for people to be dissuaded from testifying against their traffickers. But after working with various stakeholders, we just couldn't come to an agreement that would best encapsulate that relationship, and legislating a way to specifically address that dissuasion piece. And we also understand that there is not really a philosophical or appetite towards just increasing penalties, whether that's for philosophical reasons, but also for fiscal considerations in this particular legislative session. So we opted to remove the proposed changes to that section and stick with the original NRS regarding victim dissuasion and witness dissuasion. So I think your questions, while important questions for us to discuss, unfortunately with this particular amendment, they won't affect any of the existing NRS as regarding that situation.
If I may say, you have, though, included in section 1(2), where no physical force or immediate threat of physical force is used. If I'm reading this bill correctly, that's in there now, so that's added in, correct?
Jessica Adair for the record. So the orange text is the original NRS that we're proposing to revert back to. So that is an existing statute.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification. And I'll just say, I think that we can talk about sentencing, et cetera, and financial impact to the state or the counties to intimidate a witness, whether it's with immediate threat or implied threat, period, is preventing justice from prevailing or going forward, and should be a felony from my point of view from years of dealing in this. But I do appreciate it, and I thank you for the time. Thank you, Chair.
You're very welcome. I'd like to note for the record a couple of items. Assemblywoman Hanson is indeed with us now, as is Vice Chair Wynn. So Madam Secretary, could you please mark them as present? And then committee, we haven't really looked at a formal amendment yet. And so I know we have a number of new folks on the committee. So I'll just remind folks that, you know, when a bill comes out of drafting in the first place, as you're aware, the blue language is language that's being added to the statute. The red strike-through language is what is in statute and is being deleted. When we talk about amendments, we add a couple of different colors. One of those is green, and green is new language in the amendment. So that's language that doesn't appear in the original bill. And then we have purple double strike-through, and purple double strike-through signifies deletion of things that were added in the original bill. So hopefully that's not too complicated. So when you're looking at this amendment and you see those colors, really the purple are things that were in original AB 64 that are proposed to be deleted by amendment. And the orange language is new language, essentially for the first time to be added. Excuse me, I think I got those mixed up. The green language is language that is being added for the first time in the amendment, and the purple strike through, again, is language that was in the original and is being deleted. So I think that'll make a little bit more sense as we work through the process of amendments, and I appreciate Ms. Adair for trying to represent that in the amendment. It's not always intuitive, but I think as we get through this process, we'll sort of pick up on that along the way. Okay, so now that I've thoroughly confused everybody, let's see if there are additional questions. I have a few, but I want to give members a chance to ask. So are there other questions on the proposed amendment? If you could raise your hand and let me know. I don't see any at the moment, so we'll come back to other members. And Ms. Adair, I had a few questions. I think they'll be relatively simple. And if you're looking at the amendment, the first question would be on some of the language that's on page 5 of the amendment. And you touched on it a little bit, how police officers might use somebody who is not a police officer, who is posing as a child. And I think you mentioned the use of photographs, so presumably photographs of people that are not police officers and are not children, but people posing as children. I just wondered if, beyond that example, are you aware, do police actually get individuals involved in these like undercover sting operations, like aside from just the photographs? So do they actually use people to sort of do these stings and see if they can lure people and then arrest them?
Thank you, Chair. And I will just note that I prepared this amendment myself. So if you catch any mistakes, I am happy to revisit. That was my best stab at it. And yes, so this is something that I learned in our law enforcement summit. So scammers do not just target law-abiding citizens. They also target those who are using many of the online systems for soliciting commercial sexual exploitation. And so frequently when someone is engaging with a person who they are attempting to negotiate a transaction, they will say, send me a picture and hold up X number of fingers to prove that that person is a real person and not a bot or someone else who is not who they have proposed to negotiate with. So oftentimes law enforcement officers will work with people who are posing as children to represent themselves as those people when they negotiate that transaction. Then later they set up a hotel room or a home where they say, let's meet at this particular place at this particular time. The person shows up and that's when they're arrested. So it's not just an operation that is simply a matter of a conversation. That person has to take some action then in order for the operation to be complete. And to your question about live individuals in sting operations, not to my knowledge. I think that is something that is possible, but frankly not used very often because of the sheer resources that it would take to conduct those kinds of operations and the safety for officers and civilians who would be involved in those operations.
Thank you for that answer. And then moving on to page 7 of the proposed amendment, the language that you have about midway down, and I realize that this is language that's being restored from the original NRS, but just had a question down around line 29. It talks about 50% of the money deposited being used for the enforcement of this section. Is that enforcement, is that meant to mean these undercover sting operations, or what exactly would enforcement of this section encompass in terms of 50% of the money deposited in the fund?
Thank you, Chair. Jessica Adair for the record. Yes, it is for these kinds of operations and other similar operations. And this original statutory language was as a result of a bill sponsored by Assemblywoman Tolles, who I want to thank for her work on this particular issue. She passed a bill that addressed this particular section and the penalty scheme, civil penalty scheme of the depositing of fines in these two different areas. And so after hearing from stakeholders who've been relying on this statutory language and how it would affect their enforcement efforts, we propose to revert back to the original NRS.
Thank you. And then the final question I have on the amendment at the page, top of page 9, line 3, we have the word advertise, which obviously already exists in the statute. But my question was, when we then turn to page 10 of the proposed amendment, there's some language that's being deleted there that was in the original bill proposed as new language. And one of those was to define the term advertise or advertising. And so I just wondered about the thought process of deleting that definition, and perhaps there's already a definition of advertise in the NRS, but just if you could talk a little bit about why that is being removed from the original bill, please.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Chair. Jessica Adair for the record. So this was a suggestion from a trafficking organization that we expand the definition of advertising to include electronic advertising, online advertising. The problem with that in a practical standpoint is we do have legal houses of prostitution here in this state, and expanding that online provision would practically affect their ability to advertise, because a legal house of prostitution in Nye County cannot prevent a user in Clark County, for example, from viewing that website. So from a practical standpoint, it just wasn't going to work with the technology that we have now. So that's why we removed it. And that's why we removed the definition of advertising that had expanded to include that electronic means.
Thank you. That obviously makes good sense. I thought there was a reason there that I probably was just missing, so that is helpful. Committee members, other questions for Ms. Adair? Going once? Going twice? All right, it looks like I don't see questions. Members, if you do have questions after we take testimony, I'll allow you to ask some of those at the end. I know it's Monday and we're all just getting started this morning. So Ms. Adair, thank you for presenting. I'll ask you to sit tight for just a moment, and we'll come back to you for concluding remarks once we get through testimony on the bill. So I'm going to now open the testimony in support on Assembly Bill 64. We don't have anyone on the Zoom with us in support. BPS, could we go to the phone lines to see if there's anyone there who'd like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 64?
Morning. Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 64, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Callers wishing to testify in support for Assembly Bill 64, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And we will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 648. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair Yeager, members of the committee. My name is John Jones, here on behalf of the Nevada District Attorneys Association and the Clark County District Attorney's Office. We just wanted to voice our support for AB 64 and thank the Attorney General's Office for working with us on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Jones. BPS, is there anybody else in support?
Yes, next caller with the last 3 digits of 037. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Tanya Brown, TONJABROWN, Advocates for the Inmates and the Innocent. We support this bill. Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Brown. BPS, are there any other callers in support?
Yes, we will take user 1. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This is Chuck Callaway, Callaway, Director with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, calling in to show our support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Callaway. BPS, are there other callers in support?
Next caller with the last 3 digits of 196. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is Eric Spratley, ERICSPRATLEY, the Executive Director of the Nevada Sheriffs and Chiefs Association, here in support of AB 64. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Spratley. BPS, let's take the next caller, please.
For callers wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 64, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, there are no further callers in support at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I'll note for the record and for committee members that there are 2 exhibits on Nellis. One is a letter in support from Dignity Health St. Rose Dominican, and the other is a letter in support from Barbara Brentz, UNLV professor, Department of Sociology. And I do believe everyone who's testified in support, although they may not have said it, I would take it from their testimony that they're in support of the bill as proposed in the amendment. According to our rules, if you're in support, it means you support the amendment that's being presented by the sponsor, and if they oppose that amendment, they would be in opposition. So although they didn't say that, I believe that to be the case, just for the clarity of record. And if that's not the case, if someone could let us know that, would appreciate it. So I'm going to close supportive testimony. I'll now open testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 64 as proposed in the amendment. I don't think we have anyone on the Zoom with us. BPS, could we go to the phone lines to see if there's anybody there who'd like to testify in opposition?
Yes, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 64, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. For callers on the line wishing to testify in opposition, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And we will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 000. Caller with the last 3 digits of 000, please press star 6 to unmute. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
My name is Randy Henkin, R-A-N-D-Y, last name Henkin, H-E-N-C-K-E-N. I'm a resident of Washoe County. I'm not really in opposition to the bill. I think it's a good amendment, but I am concerned about what measures are in place to protect otherwise innocent people from being swept up in these child stings. I've heard and read a expose that happened up in Washington. It was in the New York Times about dozens of men who had committed no other crimes, but were caught in child stings where the people, presented a, what looked like a teenager, although it could have been perceived as an adult. And I'm curious if the DA's office is concerned or taking measures to make sure that the people they do actually capture are true predators rather than people who thought they were in some kind of cosplay. And I encourage the DA to find that expose. I could actually send it to the DA's office if they had never seen it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Henkin. And if you do find that article, feel free to send it to the committee as well. You can send it to our committee manager, or you could just forward it to me and I'll make sure everybody gets that. So thank you again for your testimony. BPS, is there anybody else in opposition to Assembly Bill 64?
Callers wishing to testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 64, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no further callers for opposition at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I will close opposition. I will now open testimony in the neutral position. Nobody on the Zoom with us would like to testify in neutral. BPS, can we go to the phones to see if there's anybody there in neutral?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to testify in neutral of Assembly Bill 64, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And we will begin with the caller with the last 3 digits of 765. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes to speak and may begin.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Caitlin Gwynn, Caiclin Gwin, and I'm here from the Sex Worker Alliance of Nevada. I'm here with your morning neutral with comments. Firstly, I really want to just say thank you to the AG's office and specifically Jessica Adair for taking the time to listen to our concerns and drop all of the increased penalties that we felt made this bill so dangerous. We are in support of the amended version. However, and we're really excited to continue conversations with the AG's office, especially with this proposed concurrent jurisdiction. With the amendment, there's really nothing in this bill that on its surface is harmful, but I do want to address some patterns that make me hesitant to throw in full support. While we're certainly not in support of enabling the abuse of children, I find the general push towards stings and arrests troubling. These patterns are consistent with what we might call the end demand model, sometimes called the Nordic model because it's popular in Scandinavian countries and in Europe. It has been proven to be inefficient in stopping the abuse of vulnerable people doing sex work. There's ample evidence about this. You can do a quick Google search with the Nordic model or the end demand model. It'll show that most major human rights organizations are against it, but let me just take a moment to illustrate it. The idea is that if somebody's doing sex work, either through enthusiastic consent or because it's their best or only option, criminalizing buyers does not make the market safer. Workers will be forced to take clients in risky situations without being able to vet them. And with the market still pushed underground, many workers will be forced to work with pimps or managers in order to access clients. While the end demand model does make the arrest of sex workers less likely, it does nothing to quell a violent and exploitative work environment. That being said, I look forward to continuing discussions with the AG's office, and maybe in 2023 we can talk about a decriminalization bill. Thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Gwynn. BPS, are there other callers in the neutral position?
We are currently in neutral of Assembly Bill 64. For callers that recently joined, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. And Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no further callers for neutral at this time.
Thank you, BPS. I will now close the neutral testimony, and I will invite Ms. Adair to provide concluding remarks. But before we do that, I just want to make sure that nobody had a question that they thought of during the testimony this morning. Okay, Ms. Adair, I don't see any hands up, so I think you're off the hook as far as questions go. And if you'd like to make concluding remarks, now would be the time for that.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank the many stakeholders who worked with us on the bill for the past couple of months, and we really appreciate their input. And we hope that you support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adair, and thanks for the work you did on this bill. Obviously, the amendment looks very different than the original bill, and I think that was a reflection of a lot of input from folks who are interested in the bill. So I appreciate your office's willingness to do that and come forward with an amendment that seems to be a consensus piece of legislation. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. I will now close the hearing on Assembly Bill 64. That'll take us to our next item on the agenda, which is public comment. By way of reminder, we'll reserve up to 30 minutes of public comment. At the end of each meeting, callers on the public comment line will have 2 minutes to provide public comment. And also by way of reminder, public comment is a time for comment of a general nature for matters within the jurisdiction of this committee. It is not a time to relitigate or reopen hearings on bills, but rather a chance to address matters of a general nature. So, BPS, could we go to the phone line and see if there's anybody there who'd like to give public comment this morning?
Thank you, Chair. For callers wishing to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. And we will begin with caller with the last 3 digits of 556. Caller, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Anne Marie Grant, ANNEMARIE GRANT. My brother was killed at Washoe County Jail after he was hogtied for 40 plus minutes and asphyxiated to death. This past Saturday, March 6th, I attended an event in Boston and stood in solidarity with families here locally impacted by police violence, including Justin Root, Terrence Coleman, and Bo Ramsey's families. Families impacted by police violence across the country were calling for a nationwide protest this past weekend as jury selection begins in the trial of the cop who killed George Floyd, Derek Chauvin. Similar events were held across the country Saturday, including Las Vegas. Our demands are the conviction of George Floyd's murderer, reopen all past cases of police brutality, abuse, murder, and cover-up. Prosecute, convict, and jail cops who abuse, murder, and cover up. Prosecute, convict, and jail those in government, to include district attorneys who aid and abet police brutality. When I watched George Floyd being murdered, it immediately brought me back to my brother and how he died a horrible, torturous death nearly 5 years before Mr. Floyd, and how so many after my brother have been asphyxiated to death by law enforcement. I call for public comment not only for my family, but for all impacted families across the country. According to fatalencounters.org, 29,639 people have died during interactions with police since the year 2000, 395 in Nevada. I want you to imagine the agonizing and terrifying death my brother Thomas experienced, hogtied for 40 minutes. Now imagine it was someone you love, your son, daughter, brother, parent. He even said to the officers, "Why did you have to do this to me? Why didn't you just charge me? You could have been a lot better people about this." It is shocking to the conscience that so many officers had the chance to speak up and save my brother's life and none chose to. I choose not to be like those moralist officers, and I will continue to speak out and urge all of you to support bills that promote transparency and accountability. Please do not support bills that protect bad police officers or extend further protections to them, such as AB 92 that I have read should it come before this committee. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment, Ms. Grant. BPS, is there anybody else on the line for public comment?
For any further callers wishing to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no further callers at this time.
Thank you, BPS, for managing public comment and the testimony on the bill today. We appreciate it. So I'll now close public comment. Before we talk about the rest of the week, is there anything from any of the committee members this morning? Okay, I don't see anything. I think we're all trying to get into this Monday morning and get things started, but we were at least able to get through Judiciary in a pretty timely fashion this morning. So members, thank you for being here on time today and for your thoughtful participation in the bill. In terms of the rest of the week, as you may have noted, we have agendas out for Tuesday and Wednesday so far. Both are going to be 8 o'clock starts. We have 2 bills tomorrow. As far as I know, there aren't amendments for those bills, but if I learn otherwise, I'll make sure to get those out to you. And then I do expect we're going to have committee meetings on Thursday and Friday. It's just a matter of which bills and what time we'll be starting. So I don't know that quite yet, but hopefully we'll know a little bit more tomorrow and Wednesday. And we also may add another bill on Wednesday. Right now, there's just one bill scheduled for hearing, but we'll probably add another one before then. So I think that's everything for today. It's good to see you all. I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you tomorrow morning in this committee at 8 a.m. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all.